Today's video is a very long collection of paranormal stories, and hopefully you enjoy it. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click that button to do so. And of course, thank you. Hey Raven. Your viewers seemed to like hearing about my night walks and sleepwalking experience, so I thought I would share something a little more recent. I posted some of this to Reddit a while back, but I figured that you and your viewers would like to hear it as well. My boyfriend and I moved into this apartment 6 years ago, and it's probably the strangest place that I've ever lived, even including the incidents in my childhood, which I'll submit at another date. It's also a block away from a really famous cemetery. In the first year that we lived here, we had this shadow, about cat-sized, that would dart back and forth between our room and the spare bedroom. The doors of those two rooms face each other, and the bathroom door is between those two doors, if anyone wants to know. So we would just see this tiny shadow figure dash past the lit bathroom multiple times a day or night. Then, one day I was getting ready to store some stuff in the spare bedroom. I turned on the light and was shocked to see a young man laying on the bed. We made eye contact, and he just vanished. Like blinked out of existence, vanished. After that, the shadow never came back. The second year had quite a few events, which I can only attribute to ghosts or shadow people. For instance, I walked into our room and saw the shadow of a person cross the wall like they walked past our bedroom window. Except, our apartment is on the second floor, with nothing but dead air outside our window. No one could have been walking there. And that summer, my boyfriend went out of town, so I decided to shampoo the carpets and had moved all the furniture into the kitchen, with the only lamp in the apartment all the way in the back and not plugged in, of course, because it wouldn't need to be used, and I would have to climb over everything to get to it anyways. I had some snacks in the bedroom in case I got hungry. I didn't finish the carpet cleaning until about 1 a.m., Thankfully, I texted the neighbors about it and had permission to take as long as I needed. Exhausted, I took a shower, shut off all the lights, and climbed into bed. I woke up at 8 a.m. to my bedside lamp, it's one of those desk lamps with the arm and all, inches from my face, and pointed directly at me. This was before we replaced all the bulbs with LEDs, so not only was it bright, but it was extremely hot. I moved it out of the way and got up to find that every single light in the house was on. Even the lamp that I couldn't reach had been plugged in and turned on. I shut off the lights that I could reach and then went to my sister's for a couple of days. When I came back, the lamp was off, but still mysteriously plugged in the same socket as the fridge. I moved the furniture back and things seemed normal for a while. That winter, though, my boyfriend and I were woken up by a flashing light. We got out of bed to investigate and found that my bicycle light was turning itself on and off in the spare bedroom. Thinking it was malfunctioning, I took the batteries out and put it back on the bicycle. We got back in bed and the spare room started flashing again. This time it was the room light, and the bicycle light that didn't even have a battery. Annoyed, I said, "Knock it off." Got out of bed and took the bulbs out of both, and then shoved them in a drawer. The next day, I put the bulbs back in, but the bicycle light wouldn't even turn on. The button wouldn't even click, so I just threw it away. The third and fourth year kind of blend together. We had some neighbors who were really loud and always negative. It seemed to attract things to our apartment. We would have nightmares most nights, and wake up hearing something inhuman cackling about it. My boyfriend and I agree that this was some form of dream demon. I woke up one morning to voices in the room, sat up, and realized it was a green ring of lights in the closet speaking. And my boyfriend was saying the exact same thing that it was at the exact same time. I don't remember everything they said, but I do remember that it rhymed. The bit that I do remember is, "We, the spirits of earth and sky, come to this world to die." Then, the last event that year was, once again, while my boyfriend was out of town. I woke up feeling like I wasn't alone in the room, so I sat up and looked around. I saw a hand coming out from under the sheets and resting on my pillow in between me and the wall. I sleep on the wall side of the bed. I grabbed the hand, instinctually I guess, and I watched the blankets move like something slithered down them and under the bed. The hand vanished and I heard a voice say, "Huh?" in a what the hell kind of tone. Having had enough, I pulled the blankets over my head, ignored the rustling sounds coming from under the bed, and just went back to sleep. Nothing happened the 5th year that we lived here, but this year we had my nephew staying in the spare room for a couple of months. When he moved out, he left the room an absolute mess. And my boyfriend and I spent a few hours cleaning it, and had to throw away most of the bedding. We also keep the litter boxes in that room, so my boyfriend cleaned them. We use these bags for the waste that are big enough for a small trash can, but are as sturdy as those black yard bags people use for leaves in the fall. Both litter boxes fill one of those pretty much all the way. My boyfriend set the bag down next to the front door, went to get the trash from under the kitchen sink to take them both out at the same time, and when he got to the door, the litter bag was gone. He asked me if I moved it. I hadn't. We spent an hour looking for it, thinking maybe we'd misremembered. I don't know if that was the ghost helping us out or if it was a glitch, but that bag of waste has not reappeared. And for those who might think that he took it out and forgot, our dumpster is half a block away, and my boyfriend was only out of my sight for less than a minute. Not enough time for him to have taken it out. And I checked the front step to see if he'd put it there as well. So, yeah, this apartment is really strange. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to let you all know. To start, I'm 31 and male. The first event happens around 15 years ago. My grandpa had kind of an old-timey gangster vibe. Nice suit, fedoras, clean cut. I was super interested in history as a kid. Grandpa was a Navy World War II vet, so me and him got along really well. We used to hang out for hours reading or watching World War II history and building models. My parents named me after him, and I've just always felt close to him. He passed away when I was around 15. It hurt my dad and I pretty bad. I have 5 siblings that didn't seem to care much about it, but it was crushing for my dad and I. So, we really built a bond through it all. So, one day my dad brings home a bunch of my grandpa's old clothes. He was a pretty wealthy guy and had a ton of really nice clothes. My dad lays piles and piles of clothes on his bed, telling me that I can look through them and have whatever I want. We hang out for a bit, looking at them, and then he leaves to go get more stuff. I'm trying on different suits, looking at myself in the big mirror in my parents' bathroom. Eventually, I put on one that just kind of feels different. Dark brown tweed, brass trims. I found it in this old canvas bag. It's big, but I felt really cool. I get the pants, vest, and jacket on and walk into the bathroom. Getting adjusted while standing in front of the mirror, I look down at the hat for a second, and then look back at the mirror. Time feels like it totally stands still. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, but it's not me. I know that I'm in my parents' bathroom looking at myself in the mirror, but it's not my reflection. It's my grandpa looking back at me in the mirror. I've never seen a picture of him when he was young, but I knew that it was him. It felt a little eerie at first, almost like I was trapped or being watched. Then, I felt this kind of brushing pressure on my chest, like someone was wiping dirt off the lapels of the suit. I felt this wave of calm come over me. I felt like he was there with me, straightening the suit up to make sure that I look good. I couldn't help but just stare at the reflection. I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt really nice. Then, it was just gone. I felt shocked for a moment and then just really sad and couldn't fight the tears from coming. I found out eventually from my grandma that he had bought that suit as a present to himself when he started his business after he got out of the Navy. Apparently, he hadn't worn it for years until he had it tailored to wear to my baptism. To her memory, he put it in a canvas bag after, and she hadn't seen him wear it since. I felt it again on my wedding day. Getting adjusted in the mirror, being nervous, I felt that pressure on my chest again. Just a gentle sense of calm. It felt like he was there with me. Was wearing a different suit, but I still felt it. I didn't need that shot of whiskey I was about to take, and went on to have one of the best days of my life. I still have it. It didn't fit me until I was in my mid-20s, and I've had it tailored a few times now, but I wear it whenever I get the chance. Okay, so this all started when I moved to my apartment a few years ago. And just so everyone knows, I have a cat and a dog. But I got my cat in 2020, and I moved into the apartment in 2019. So, first, when I moved in, nothing really happened. Other than hearing meows, and when asking if anyone else heard them too, they would all say no. Most of this stuff takes place in 2022 and 2023, because those are where the experiences were at their fullest. So, first, I would hear cat footsteps when my cat wasn't near. I would hear them under the bed, and when I checked under the bed, there would be nothing there. And no, it can't be my dog, because my dog's footsteps are way louder, and she was in my bed anyways. I would see a shadow of a cat randomly, and once I heard the sound of a cat playing with something, which I'm used to as my cat is very energetic and plays with almost anything. And I was home alone, so I thought it was my cat. It was in my big brother's room, just so you know, which is across the hall. I looked beside me, and then I saw my cat. So she wasn't in that room. She was just sitting down on the floor. I thought maybe my dog had somehow done it, but it couldn't be her as she was on my lap at the time. So, I gathered the courage I had to walk over there with my pets, of course. But when I checked under the bed, which was where the sound was coming from, there was nothing there. I would hear random meows from random places that nobody else could hear. I think I even saw the cat. It was a black and white cat. This isn't the only paranormal experience. My brother has also had some, but this is just the one that I can't really explain. I would also hear a cat jumping onto the bed. Once I even saw the cat, so I know that it wasn't mine. My cat is black and gray with only a little bit of white. Even if I was hearing and seeing things, well, that wouldn't be possible for what happened a few months ago. A few months ago, I was sitting on my bed on my phone. I then felt my cat climbing on top of me, which she does often. So, I thought it was my cat, as I felt the weight of her and felt her getting on top of me. I looked up, and saw nothing. There was nothing there. I only felt the cat getting on me, not getting off. And I would see my cat in the corner of my eye if she had jumped off, so this just can't be explained. It's very weird that I would always hear the meows, and even see my cat meowing at nothing while looking up. I would always hear my cat's footsteps when she wasn't there, and even see the shadow of the cat, or the cat itself. And I know that I felt it. I don't know what's going on. I don't know whose cat it is, nor do I know why only I can hear it and see it. This will take a lot of backstory and explaining, but it's worth it. This is one of many stories that I have. Growing up, we lived in a few different houses. The story is about the current house that my parents live in. My parents' houses have always been haunted. I've always been sensitive to ghosts for as long as I can remember. Every house that we've lived in has been haunted, and I have been haunted, and a few of those ghosts are attached to me still. Even though I'm moved out, things still occur. Most of the ghosts attached are good, I make sure of it, so don't worry. Anywho, backstory time. I will probably be referencing multiple houses, so I'm going to name the current house they live in the Shelby House. When I was younger, we lived in the same neighborhood that they live in now. We moved out of our first house and moved to a couple different houses, and now my parents are living in the same original neighborhood that I grew up in. It is a house a few houses down from our first house. The Shelby house has had a few different owners, and being a small town, we knew most of the owners. Well, the previous owners, Thomas and Grace, fake names for privacy, were a couple with an empty nest. I'm not sure how long they owned the house before us, but they were the couple that my parents bought the house from. They aren't there now, but when we moved in, the mailbox and the curb across from it had rose bushes at the end of the driveway. They had been there for a while. As I said, we knew some of the previous owners of this house, so the rose bushes were there since I was a kid. I remember seeing them when we would go visit sometimes. Now, the driveway is horrendous. It's so hard to get out of, and that's very important to the story. Back to the story. So, there were a lot of different incidents of this happening to the point that Grace would make jokes about it to us. When my parents bought the house, Grace said, "Be careful of the rose bushes, they're cursed. The roses caused Thomas to die." She made some jokes like, "Just make sure you don't run over the roses," and laughed. My parents are super religious, so they didn't believe her, and they don't believe in ghosts or curses. Well, every time someone related to Thomas and Grace, themselves, friends, family, anybody, would run over those bushes on the curb opposite to the mailbox, they would have the worst luck for like an entire week. And people would tell Thomas and Grace about it. Now, this is where the story takes a turn. Thomas ran over the rosebush one day, and a week later, he sadly had a heart attack and died inside the house. That's what led Grace to sell the house to my parents. It's important to note that Thomas was 6 foot. I have no idea if the previous owners had stuff happen to them because of said rose bushes. Okay, now to how the roses take effect on my family. We hadn't even lived in this house for a month, and my father accidentally ran over the rose bushes one day. That week, he got some rare type of food poisoning, went septic in the middle of the night, and had to be rushed to the hospital. He passed out at home while in the kitchen and fell and broke his ribs because he hit the floor so hard. The doctor said that it was a miracle he survived. He was in the hospital for at least 2 months or more, and also had to have some type of surgery. Then, my mother ran into the rose bushes on her way to work, and she had someone rear-end her. Everyone was fine in the crash, but still, what? So after those two things happened, my parents decided to take the rose bushes on both sides up and just replant different flowers. My parents were too busy to do it, so they told my brother-in-law and sister to do it. My brother-in-law's mother helped them. They all had bad luck and had catastrophic things happen to them for almost a month. I can't remember what they were because it was one after another, almost every single day. They replanted different flowers and the new flowers died immediately. No matter how many flowers my family replanted, they would all die. Now, I lived in that house for about a year or so before I moved out. I would always hear footsteps and voices when no one was home. I always had nightmares of me being haunted and possessed and bad things happening to my family. I would constantly have sleep paralysis. It was to the point where I wouldn't sleep because I was scared to have nightmares. Or I'd sleep in my car, or sleep when I would come home from school around lunch. Well, one day I was home alone and eating lunch in the living room, while on the phone with my boyfriend at the time, Owen. From the couch, you can see into my room and the hallway at any angle pretty much. I was on FaceTime with Owen and watching GMM like every day when I got home from school around lunchtime. I remember that I was sitting there eating ramen, and all of a sudden I see this 6-foot-tall dark figure just walk into my room from the hallway, and then I heard someone go into my room. I saw my door open, and I said, "Owen, I think someone is in my house." And he said, "Okay, get something to protect yourself and stay on the phone. If something happens, I'll call the cops." I grab a knife from the kitchen, and when I walk into my room and I check out my brother's room and the bathroom, no one is there. A couple of days go by and the same thing happened. It kept happening. So I told my brother about it and he said the same would happen to him. The day that I moved out of that house, all of the nightmares of me having possessions and being haunted, and bad things happening to my family, and sleep paralysis, stopped. My brother tells me that he has them now, and most nights he won't sleep in the house. He'll go to my sister's house and sleep. Every time I go to my parents' house now, I go home with a giant migraine, and I just feel like my entire energy is drained out of me. This is another story from my mom, though this time it's from when she was a teen. When my mom was around 15, she had lived in Germany for a few years. Her and her parents lived in a 3-story old brick house, though this was a rental house, which they were only going to be living in for a small amount of time. One night, when my mother went to bed, she tossed and turned, unable to go to sleep for some reason. She didn't know why, but she had a horrible gut feeling. She finally decided to sit up in her bed, knowing that something was definitely wrong. Though, before she decided to go to her parents' room, she sees a figure standing outside of her window. It was the outline of a man, with the only thing that could be properly made out was the fact that this man had red eyes. My mother wanted to scream for a second, but then something hit her. Her room was on the 3rd floor of the house. There was no way that anyone could be standing outside her window unless they had gotten a ladder and climbed it. But the noise surely would have woken the whole house up. If not, at least she would have noticed. Something in my mother told her not to get up, to just lay back down and pretend to be asleep, as if she didn't see anything. As much as she wanted to go running to her parents' bedroom, something deep down was sending off alarms telling her not to. The whole night, my mom laid in her bed unable to get up, but unable to fall asleep due to pure fear overtaking her. She waited until the sun was shining when she looked back over to the window, and the man was no longer there. She sighed in relief, though she was still unable to go back to sleep, so she got up and walked to her parents' bedroom, where she woke them both up and told them what happened. My grandfather, her dad, walked to my mom's room, though him and my grandmother didn't really believe my mom, thinking she was just having a bad dream or something. He told her it was nothing and that no one could have been at her window since they were so far up from the ground. My mom begged my grandparents to believe her, saying that she wasn't able to sleep all night, nor get up to tell the two of them, though they still didn't believe her. 2 weeks go by and my mother had only seen the man at her window 5 other times, though she felt like she was being constantly watched in the neighborhood. She kept telling her parents, though each time they didn't believe her, saying that she was just imagining it. Then, whenever my grandparents were visiting with the next-door neighbor, my mother's so-called nightmares were brought up by my grandparents to the lady. The lady went pale as a ghost the moment my grandfather described the man that my mother had described to them time and time before in the last week. The lady said it was a spirit that's been around for decades, just standing outside of young girls' rooms watching them. No one knew why or when the first time the spirit had arrived, but when it did, it never left. Most of the neighbors believed it to be an evil spirit that would prey on the young girls, and once it had its eyes on the next victim, the girl would go crazy seeing the man everywhere they go in the neighborhood. Though it was just a rumor. This was enough to make my grandparents freak out and move out of the rental as quickly as they could, which luckily was extremely quick, since they had just moved in and most of the boxes hadn't even been unpacked yet. This had to be one of the more creepy stories that my mom has told me. Though many people wouldn't see it as too bad, my mom was terrified. Even when telling the story, which she won't often do, you can tell that she still gets freaked out. This story may need a little context, so here are a few key things to keep in mind. 1. I was raised by my grandparents. 2. I only saw my mother off and on. 3. She has a large number of sisters. 4. It is not uncommon for me to mistake my nieces and nephews with my aunt and uncles. And 5, yes, my mom's mom and my mom had kids at the same time, and I rarely saw them, so I get confused sometimes. With all that out of the way, let's dive in. I was 15 at the time, and my mother was having a large family gathering at her house. I was invited because, while my mother and I weren't close, she had recovered from drug use for 2 or 3 years, and was making a solid effort to turn her life around. Several of my aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, and nephews would be there, and at this point, my grandparents were pretty confident my mother was actually trying really hard to reestablish a relationship with me. We weren't the best of friends, but I also didn't hate her either. I get there and it is blatantly a fantastic time. The younger of us played in the water slides, went on 4-wheeler rides, and had ice cream from an ice cream truck, and we were all a little tired by the end of day 1. Then, the night comes. My mom puts on The Outsiders for us to watch while we were going to bed, because I think any sane human knows that trying to get 10+ teenagers to bed on time is a wasted effort. I was exhausted, but unfortunately I had battled badly with insomnia my entire life. It was 2:30 a.m., and everyone else was asleep. Someone knocks on the door of the room that we're staying in. I'm a little aggressive at this point, saying something along the lines of, "It's 2 a.m. What?" and a voice using a bad redneck accent responds saying, "It's your Uncle Mike. Go grab a knife in the kitchen." I was kind of in a jolt of thought about that, because I did have an Uncle Mike in the house at the time, but he actually was a redneck. This was almost as if someone was held at gunpoint and told they had to do a redneck accent, but physically were not able to. They were also sounding like they were choking on every word. So, I simply decided I wasn't going to do that. "No, it's 2 a.m. I'm not grabbing a knife from the kitchen, Mikey." I had never called my uncle that, but for some reason, the fear made me speak out of sync with my thoughts a bit. "But we made cake for everyone. You have to get a knife from the kitchen." Hell no, I thought. Mike couldn't cook anything other than bacon, hamburgers, and steak. I opened the door and rushed into my oldest cousin's room. He was sleeping on a bed in a tent inside. Mr. Lonely was playing with a blue room light on. I locked the door behind me and slept with my cousin, who was in their 20s, and he was rough around the edges. I slept in that room that night only to wake up to accusations. My aunt, the one married to Mike, asked why I was banging on her door all night. I told her I wasn't. She said that at apparently a similar time that I went into my cousin's room, I banged on her door and she got dressed to open it. The door to my cousin's room was open, the lights were off, and no music was playing in the room. But no one was in there. When I told her my version of the story, she said that it was impossible because Mike left for work at 7:30 to be at work at 8 p.m., and wouldn't be back until closer to 4 a.m. My older cousin, who I slept with, also had a different version of the story, stating that he woke up to no one in the room but his door open, and him looking down the hallway to every door in the hallway being opened. He shrugged it off and went back to bed after locking his door. He had no explanation for how I got into his room without jimmying the door open. After some conversation, my oldest cousin whipped out a cell phone and started begrudgingly asking questions. When we heard nothing, we listened to the video, and a clear-as-day voice could be heard speaking, saying, "My name is Mike. I'm here." It sounded like it was choking, but without a bad southern accent. Afterwards, my family just decided it was a weird night, and didn't bring it up again, except in joking ways because, what are you gonna do about it? My mom and my aunt are very spiritual, but I'm a skeptic. I just thought I would tell my version of the events. And, yeah, my whole family thought that it was weird that I heard a voice at the other side of the door, and when I opened it, no one was there. And I never even thought about that aspect as a scared teenager. In 2020, at the beginning of COVID, I had just given birth. At this time, I could only have one other person in the room with me my entire stay at the hospital. Of course, my kid's father was there, but the third day, he left to clean up our house and get everything prepared for me and the baby. I had gotten sick and had a C-section, so I had to stay for about 4 to 5 days. Well, while he was away, a nurse named Kelly said that she would be helping me throughout the day and spending time with me so I didn't feel lonely while Dad was gone. I couldn't really hold my baby due to me being sick and the pain from the C-section, so my nurses would come in every time it was time to feed. I noticed when they came in they wouldn't acknowledge Kelly, and she would go to the furthest part of the room and would tell me, "I'm just gonna get out of the way." Now, she did tell me that she didn't specialize in what they did, so she was just for comfort. So I didn't really question anything. The entire day she was so helpful and encouraging to me, I really believe that I would have broken down if she wasn't in there with me. She was such a sweetheart. Well, after about 5 or 6 hours, she told me that she had to leave, and that she would come to visit me before her shift was over to see how I was doing. She hugged me, and blew a kiss at my baby and then walked out of the room. Later that night, Dad came back and he was very upset. He told me some stuff happened with his mom and that he was sorry he took so long. I was upset, but I told him that a nurse named Kelly kept me company. As I'm telling him about her, my nurse is changing my sheets and she's like, "Who's Kelly?" I explained and she said that nobody named Kelly was in my room or working that day. So, I instantly thought about those women who would pretend to be nurses and kidnap children. But my nurse told me that I may just be hallucinating, and she told my doctor. I talked to my doctor and he said the same thing. A couple of hours later, a nurse that I didn't recognize came into my room and said, "I know this might sound crazy, but everyone on the floor is talking about you seeing Kelly." And I said, "Yeah, she was here with me for like 7 hours today. She helped out a lot." We're smiling and laughing while I was telling her about Kelly and how sweet and funny she was. And then she pulled up her phone and showed me a picture of her and Kelly that looked to be like it was in the early 2000s. I was smiling, knowing that I wasn't hallucinating. Then, she sat down and told me that Kelly died over 10 years ago due to domestic violence from her boyfriend. I wasn't too shocked because my entire life I've been dealing with the paranormal, but I got chills because I never had an encounter this deep. Well, the lady gave me a hug and started crying, saying, "Now I know that she is okay." Ever since that day, I've been wondering, why did Kelly come into my room to help me? And I kind of wish that I could see her again. I don't know if this will be popular or if anyone will see it. This is the first time that I'm sharing this with the world, let alone really anybody other than my immediate family. I thought it would be fun to hop on here and share a story for fun that will always be an interesting topic. When I was 10 to 12, give or take, I lived in a house near Illinois, not giving away the whereabouts. This house was a normal, mid-90s household that was built in the 90s. What happened to my family was around 3 or 4 years ago. Anywho, this house was a normal household, and we had lived in it up to that point for a good 5 years. Nothing happened, and we were fine. Everything was fine up until the point that we put our house on the market. I was a little girl and was always upstairs doing my own thing. One night, about a couple of days with our house being on the market, my mother went to take the dog out late at night, probably like midnight. And as soon as she entered the garage alone with the dog, a slow scratching noise would start going up and down on a styrofoam box that we had on the garage counter. My mom went to look on the other side of the box, expecting an animal to be causing this sound. To her surprise, nothing was there, and the box was left untouched, at least by anything living. The slow scratching eventually turned into a fast, inhuman scratch. Thinking nothing of it, she continued on with her night and went to bed. I wish I could say that that was the last thing that happened, but unfortunately, it wasn't. A lot of this happened to my mom, as the next thing that happened was when she was relaxing and taking a bubble bath. I can't remember if this was during the day or night, but I'm going to say that it was at night. Our bathroom had 2 doors to enter, one from the hallway and one from the master bedroom. My mom had these both open, or at least had the hallway entrance closed. However, one door open was enough for her to see a shadow figure. She describes it as a figure running across the entrance. Also to mention that nobody was home with her. And she doesn't believe it was anything, just maybe it was her imagination. Meanwhile, I was around 10 years old enough to be home alone, and when I was home alone, the house would be dead silent. Just me and whatever else was there. I would hear footsteps as clear as day upstairs, walking. I don't know if it could have been the house settling in, but there was something there with me, walking right above me. Not only have I experienced this, but this has also happened to my mother as well. The night that changed our lives was the night that my sister found out. My sister did her own thing usually, so I don't think she really knew much of what was happening. One night, my sister came up to my mom and had explained to her that, at night, she would see figures and would be able to speak to them. This creeped me out because, at the time, we would share a room, and I guess that I would have had to have been sleeping. I'm still not sure if she's a medium or not, but I guess I would assume that she is. I forget what the spirits may have said to her or what she would have said to them, but I know that she had that ability. Flashback to when I was 8 years old. Mind you, this was before anything had happened. I was going upstairs from the living room, and on around like the third or second step, I was pulled down off the stairs by my shoulders. I don't know if it could have just been me falling backwards off the stairs, but if I'm remembering correctly, I remember there being this weird force. Like, I could feel something grabbing me. Anyways, after everything that happened, my mother was sleeping like every other night. However, on this specific night, she was woken up in the darkness by an unfamiliar voice saying, "Hey." She turned on the lampshade and nobody was there. And my dad had always been a heavy sleeper, so it couldn't have been him. When we were selling our house, we obviously had to leave so the people who were interested in buying could go and view the house. After a viewing, we went back, and as soon as we were going upstairs, my sister's school picture was on the floor, and only hers had been knocked off. We speculate that it could have been the people accidentally knocking it off, but the photo was secure, and the people who had viewed it didn't knock it off the wall, quoted from the realtor that had been there. After we had thankfully sold the house and moved out, my mother had mentioned to the realtor all of our paranormal activity that we had been experiencing. And, to our shock, the realtor who had lived in the same house prior to us had mentioned similar experiences, as well as haunted furniture that she had brought into the house years and years back that had generations of potential spirits attached to them. I hope this was entertaining, and I'm very blessed to be in a new house, and I hope to never experience that again. I guess moral of the story, don't buy potentially haunted furniture. Also, I watch Sam and Colby all the time, so I mean maybe they should do an investigation there sometime. And to add an update, I was in my sister's apartment the other day and was looking at an old photograph of her and her boyfriend smiling in front of our old house. After looking closely at the photo, trying to see if I could find anything possibly in the windows behind them, I saw a very distorted and demonic face looking back at them. I took a picture of it and have it on my phone, but I'm not sure how to put it on the post. After finding this in the picture, it scared me so much that I could barely go upstairs by myself at night. I've been babysitting for this family for 2 years now. The kids are 2 girls. A is 10 and Y is 7. This happened around September of last year. The family lives on the countryside with some horses and a farm about a 5-minute walk away. There are other houses nearby too. On this particular night, it was a little rainy and Y was fast asleep, while I was struggling getting A into her bed. It was around 10 p.m. and her mom was due back soon, so I was aware that she'd be annoyed if she was still awake. A asked for a bedtime story, which I was happy to do. She climbed into the bed, and the family dog decided to join her and jumped up into the bed too. Around 20 minutes later, A was getting pretty close to falling asleep when I heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by the inner boot room door opening too, which had a distinctive squeaking sound. I sighed, knowing that she was back and A wasn't asleep, so she'd be annoyed with A. Although, when I checked my phone, I noticed that she was about 25 minutes early, which is strange of her. The dog instantly jumped off the bed and ran downstairs barking, which in turn caused A to sit up and ask, "Is that Mummy?" I assured her it was okay and to lay back down, as I knew she was pretty much about to fall asleep. Which she did. I got up and started walking out of her room and across the landing to the stairs. Only the top of the stairs are visible from the area that I was standing. Before I could make it to the top of the stairs, I heard the sound of the mum's voice calling up, "Hello?" from the bottom of the stairs. She said it in a whisper, so I replied whispering, "Hi." Although, when I got to the top of the stairs, I peered down, and there was no one there. Just a weird silence/emptiness. I slowly walked down and looked around all the rooms, but with no sign of the mum, or anyone for that matter. The door was still locked, and their dog was now laying down by it. Trying not to freak out, I unlocked the door, expecting to see her car or a neighbor or something, but there was no one there. I even checked in on why, but she was still asleep. I could not find a cause of all this. No intruders, no TVs on, and no one was downstairs when it happened. Their mum arrived back 20 minutes after this, and I told her about what happened. She was shocked and a little scared, but assured me that she had not come back early and left again, like I'd convinced myself what had happened. A, thankfully, didn't remember any of this the next morning. As I expected, she was half asleep when she asked, "Is that Mummy?" I really just don't know what to think about this situation. Strange things have happened before here. Random noises, footsteps, etc., but nothing as real and scary as this. Anyone have any thoughts? This one was a bit unnerving, but not really terrifying. We've had weird experiences in our house for many years. In fact, I've smudged the house twice since the activity began. It worked, but eventually it would always start back up, but be different. I attribute this to the fact that I'm a home improvement contractor and have strange experiences in people's homes all the time. Anyway, the other day I was down in my basement switching out laundry. My washer and dryer are at the very bottom of the stairs near my boiler and hot water heater. I put a load of clothes in the dryer, started it, and went back upstairs. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard a loud metallic bang, as if something heavy fell and hit the dryer. I went back down thinking I had knocked something over when I left, but could find nothing out of place. I looked around for a minute or two, and finding nothing, I blew it off and went back upstairs. When I reached the top of the stairs, I was about to open the door and walk into my kitchen when I heard it again. The loud, metallic bang. The exact same sound that I'd heard earlier. Now I'm starting to freak out a little. I thought maybe I put something in the dryer that could cause the noise, so I went back down, opened up the dryer, and looked through the clothes, but found nothing. I restarted the dryer and waited a good 4 to 5 minutes looking around for something that could have caused the noise, and I found nothing. The noise did not happen after I restarted the dryer. Now, I'm thinking it could be a spirit messing with me. We had our house read last year, and the sensitive told us that we had 2 spirits that resided in our basement. One was an old man who hung out over by my little workshop on the opposite end of the basement. and the other was a little boy who resided in the area near the washer and dryer, where we store all of our clothes. Thinking the boy was playing games with me, I spoke out loud to the empty room and basically said that I was okay with sharing the house with spirits as long as they meant no harm to me or my family, and that if they meant to scare or terrorize anyone, that they were not welcome and would have to leave. I turned around and went back upstairs, and the noise hasn't happened again. Was it a ghost? I have no idea, but it stopped when I asked it to, and I still have yet to find something that could have caused that banging noise. I'm a long-time listener and first-time submitter. Let me first say that I have witnessed more than a few paranormal experiences in my 62 years on this earth. But this particular incident is a head-scratcher, as I was not physically present when it occurred. My wife and I own 2 horses who were once abandoned by their previous owners. For the last 10+ years, we've spent considerable time getting them happy and healthy. I'm a retired law enforcement officer, and my wife is currently working. As such, I spend almost every day at the barn where our horses, Romeo and Susie, presently board. Even though the barn provides a stall cleaner whom I will call Jay, I choose to clean my horses' stalls. It's good old-fashioned work that feeds the soul. I did miss a day last week, so Jay cleaned the stalls for me. When I arrived at the barn the following day, I was greeted by Jay, who proceeded to tell me about his lucky poker hand that netted $490. In the middle of his tale, he stopped and shockingly stared at me. Jay proceeded to tell me the following story. Jay said he was cleaning Susie's stall when he heard Romeo, who was in the adjacent stall, start to stir. Next, Jay said that he heard my loud, distinct whistle from close proximity to where he was cleaning. Simultaneously, Romeo excitedly cried out for me. The only problem was that I wasn't there and neither was anyone else in the barn. Jay was puzzled. There was no way that someone could have whistled that loud from such a close area and then exit the barn in such a quick fashion. Jay canvassed the area directly in and around the barn without seeing anyone, nor were there any cars in the dirt parking lot some 50 yards away. When I go to the barn, it is rare that anyone but Jay is there. Most people ride late afternoon after work, and when I offered possible explanations, Jay waved me off with, "If Romeo didn't cry, maybe I could say that I imagined it, but nobody but you has that whistle, and only Romeo responds to it. It was a human whistle, not a whistle coming from a pipe or a machine. I looked and looked, but I didn't find anything." I should note that Jay is a very spiritual and practical person, not prone to messing with people or exaggeration. We do have peacocks around the area who are quite noisy, but when I offered that as a possibility, Jay just shook his head and said, "No, they don't sound like your whistle." I didn't think much about it until later that evening. Could it be some form of audio energy being released at my usual arrival time, because I whistle every time I approach Romeo's stall? I just don't know, but what I've learned during my lifetime is that there are things that just cannot be explained. They are so-called horse whisperers. Maybe there are horse whistlers as well. I would love to hear if anyone else has experienced a mysterious whistling. So, I'm 15, and tonight, I saw something. I think I saw something that reminded me of something else that I saw a few years ago, and I wanted to share it here. First, I think I should say what I believe I saw tonight. It's summer, and it's fairly hot, and we're doing some cleaning and packing, so my sister and I, we share a room, have been sleeping in the living room, and I was getting back from the bathroom and heading into the living room. We were watching The Muppet Show with my sister, and when I walked past my bedroom door, it was cracked open. But I swear that it was shut before, and I think I saw a pale white face through it. I think like Marinate from FNAF, having hollow dark eyes and a big hollow smile, just without the red cheeks, purple tears, and lipstick. It reminded me of a few summers ago. I don't think it was many years ago, just like 2020 or 2021. I was sleeping in the living room by myself to have some space for my sister, I believe. I was catching up on Amphibia, which is a cartoon that I like, and while the next episode was loading, I went to get a snack. I got myself some dry Fruit Loops because they taste better dry. Then I walked back to the living room. Now, how my apartment is set up, the living room and kitchen have no doors. There's just a part of a wall that divides the rooms. So there's the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen, and the dining room is the room that you walk into when you go inside the apartment. It's the room you have to walk through to get into any other room. Depending on where in the living room you are, you can see all or most of the dining room and have a direct view of the path to the front door. And when I walked back to the living room, I felt that feeling of having eyes on me. I quickly turned around and saw what looked like a woman. She was in a long white dress, maybe a wedding dress from what I remember. The bottom of the dress seemed more white, and then the higher up on the body, I guess, it began to blur more. And where the head would be was like faded out. It was coming towards me, and I very quickly turned away and closed my eyes. When I looked back, she was gone. I've seen other white blurs and shadows as well as seeing and hearing other things, and my siblings have too, so I wouldn't be surprised if my apartment was haunted. But although I remember these other experiences, I only have 3 that I think really stuck with me. One being the person in the dress. But since it stuck with me, I'm curious. Does anyone know who the lady in the dress might be? Is it a good spirit? I don't know if I've seen her again or not, but I remember that one time where I know that I did so well. When I was about 10 years old, we were living in a horseshoe-shaped housing estate. One way in, same way out. As you first came into the street, there were bungalows, maybe 5 or 6 with elderly residents, and then family homes after that. One of the older residents was a lady called Ms. Green. She was the grandmother of my school friend who did not live in that estate. One afternoon, my sister and I, she was a year older than me, came walking up the hill and into the estate coming home from school. Ms. Green was standing on the little path that led to her door, looking very distressed. We asked her if she was okay. She said, "I can't get back into my house." I asked if she had lost her key, and she replied, "No, I just can't get back in." She was holding a small clip purse, wallet in America, and she opened it. There was a small amount of change in it, and on top of the change was a single key. I lifted it out and asked her if that was her front door key. She replied with, "Yes, please. Will you help me get back in?" We said of course and walked up her path. I was a bit worried about her as she was acting so strange. My sister put the key in the door and turned it, and just then, the lady from across the road shouted, "Get away from there! What are you doing? You're morbid!" We turned to look at her, and I said that we were just helping Miss Green. I looked back to see that she must have already gone back into the house, so we left and went home. I asked my mom what morbid meant, and told her what happened. She said that Miss Green had gone out back the night before to get coal for the fire, All the houses had coal fires. It was Ireland in the 70s. And she had slipped and fallen outside the back door and was unable to move. Her body had been found that morning. She died mostly from the cold, but she'd also damaged her hip in the fall. This is a ghost story, I guess. If I'm being honest, I'm not really sure myself. For a little backstory, it was my 13th birthday, and me and my friends were going to hang out all day, and then they were going to stay the night. My grandparents had a huge farm, so of course we were all going to stay there. The girls would sleep with me in the camper, and the boys would sleep in the house about 80 to 90 feet away from us. There were 4 girls, including myself, and then the boys. We decided that we would play hide and seek at night before we would hit the sack. Boys were finders, girls were hiders. We decided to hide in the far back of the land, where there were tractor parts and such. Now, right beside us was a driveway in the woods that it wasn't ever really used. This driveway also led to the road about a mile away. So we got quiet, and of course the adrenaline was already high from the excitement of hiding. Everything was still except for the crickets. Then, as if we were in a movie, loud thumping footsteps rang through the woods right on the driveway that I was talking about. We froze. The boys were on the other side of the land by the farm, so there was no way that it was them, and there was no way to warn them. It was about 30 minutes before the boys made their way over, which is when the footsteps stopped. We were all freaking out as we tried to tell the boys, but they didn't care, and then they went to the house to sleep. So, as shook up as we were, we went to our little camper and settled in. Now, the other girls fell asleep quickly, but I stayed up because, well, I'm almost an insomniac. It was maybe 1 in the morning, and I started staring at the camper ceiling when the footsteps were thumping again, but this time it got a lot closer. I looked out the camper window, which luckily had blinds that were thin, to see a silhouette. I stopped completely and stared at this thing, and then it spoke in a gravelly voice. It said, "You better be careful next time." I will admit that I was crying from fear, but I'm not going to let this person play with me like this, so I opened the blinds just to see nothing. It was completely empty. I thought I was going insane until I heard the footsteps walking away and a very low giggle. Not like a kid giggling, but like a man giggling. I never spoke of this to anyone because, well, who was going to listen to a 13-year-old? Hi, Raven. My name is Brylee White, and I'm a big fan, but anyways. I lived in a haunted house, and in my basement I had one of the creepiest things happen to me. So, me and my brother were sleeping in my basement, and he went to sleep around 11 o'clock. So, I was up alone, and I'm sitting watching TV, and then it randomly turns off. So, it was pitch black. I did have a phone, but I didn't have internet. So I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, I heard someone or something run up my stairs. I heard that for about an hour, and then it stopped. So I was kind of freaked out. Then I heard the door to the garage slam open, and then shut. I froze in fear. It was close to Halloween, and we had decorations out, and we had this bowl where, if you'd stick your hand inside of it, it would go off. And I heard that go off. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like a cold wind ran through me. Then I got on my phone and went on Netflix, and like I said, I didn't have any internet, so I went to my downloads on Netflix, and it was all horror movies. I turned off my phone and rolled over, and I felt something touch me on my back. It was like 7 or 8 in the morning, and it was just now getting light outside, so I ran upstairs as quickly as I could. I was in total fear. I've told some people about it, and nobody believes me, but that's my story, and I'll probably come in here and tell another one later. Recently, I've mentioned to my mother about my interest in paranormal experiences, which I then asked her if she'd had any. She replied with a few stories, but one stuck out to me. The story begins with toddler me eating breakfast and my mother in the kitchen. I turned to her and asked, "Mommy, can you make that cat stop staring at me?" At the time, we had a cat named Piper, so she thought I was talking about, well, Piper. She told me that she can't do anything about Piper looking at me, and I responded, "Not Piper, the white and orange cat." This got her confused. We didn't have a white and orange cat. She asked me what I was talking about, and I said, "You know, the cat right there." And then I pointed to the couch. She didn't see anything. Later, out of curiosity, she asked our neighbors about the cat that I saw. They told her that they did have a cat, but the only white and orange one they've ever owned had passed away. So, my mother and I think that I saw our neighbor's dead cat. So that, my friend Dorinos, was a very good collection of paranormal stories. I know this video is late, and I apologize for that. As I've mentioned in my community tab, this week has been kind of a crappy one. After the 4th, I started feeling really, really sick to the stomach, and it was bringing me down. The night of the 4th, Wednesday and Thursday, it was kind of dragging my ass to the ground, so I'm feeling quite a bit better now. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this collection of stories. I figured since it was late, I'd make it a nice long video, and 64 minutes of paranormal stories, I think that's a pretty good collection, if you ask me, so yeah. Hopefully you all enjoyed them. If you did, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button, as it helps the video tremendously. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, you can do other things such as joining Patreon or memberships to get early access to content or things like that. Or doing a super thanks, which is just a donation to the channel. Never expected, always appreciated. The 2 other things you can do is go down below the video and leave me a comment with your thoughts, how you're doing, how your week's been, what you want me to cover in another video, a future video. If I can find stories for it, you guys know I'll do it. I have stuff planned out, but that doesn't mean things can't change, so if you have suggestions, please, always feel free to make them. You can also leave me a comment, I don't know. What's your favorite fruit? I've been pretty into pineapple lately. Like, I think pineapple might actually be my favorite fruit now. It used to be bananas, but pineapple's pretty tops. So are mangoes. They're pretty damn good. Yeah. The other thing you can do is, if you have a story or an experience you want to share on the channel, just go to the website, astheravendreams.com, and there's a button in the middle of the screen to submit your story. I would really appreciate it, especially glitch stories. We are running low on those. I know I say that a lot, and it's pretty consistent that we're running low, so you guys always seem to come through for me, so of course, I'm gonna beg for them, so please send me glitch stories. Anyways, I hope you're all having a beautiful week. I hope you have a great weekend. I will see you again tomorrow for my next video, which will be a good one. Yeah. But of course, until then, friends, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Never forget it, and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise, because they're wrong. And of course, until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.